Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya。
大家好，扎西德勒。我昨天是从悉尼，飞到洛杉矶。我从悉尼起飞的时候也是星期五，我到这里昨天晚上也是星期五。我一个星期享受了2个星期五，在这个最重要的目的，从洛杉矶机场到这里开几个小时的车程，再来到这个地方，唯一的目的就是为了这个访谈。今天我们能邀请到的嘉宾是非常特别的一个人物，他是一个洋人，同时他是一个藏传佛教的一个顶级的翻译家。所以首先我想上级看住了扎西德勒，您为什么接触藏传佛教，是什么样的一个因缘？
That's a big question. Well, I was always religious as a young person, meaning I was interested in spirituality. And I was raised a Mormon, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Mormon. And so we went to church, and we were very involved with the church. And in fact, I was baptized for the dead, according to the Mormon tradition, some 150 times. And so I was quite involved. But when I was 14, I started to have more questions about the theology. And I decided to ask the bishop one day why there were no people of color in the church. And I think he was quite surprised to receive this question from me. But his answer was that God had not yet given permission for their souls to enter heaven. And that was when I knew that I couldn't continue with that path. And so I was in school, I was studying, and just immersed myself in education. I did very well in school. I finished high school in 2 years, and then I went to the University of Oregon. And I was in my second year studying English literature. But you know, in our life at that time, growing up in the 60s, it was the hippie movement. And the hippie movement means many young people who were disillusioned with the lifestyle that their parents were leading. And their parents were leading what the rest of the world might consider to be a very incredibly fortunate lifestyle. Middle class American dream, get your own home, have a car. But for us, as young people watching their way of life and how they were relating, many of us felt it's very meaningless. No meaning, no good purpose. I very much felt that way. And I decided I don't want to live like this. Just work hard in order to have a house, in order to have a car, in order to have children, and just this regular way of life, and then you die. So I began questioning. I studied the astrological Western system, the occult, other things, and meanwhile my parents moved to Hawaii, and my father was transferred a lot. So I was in Hawaii, and there you open up because there's many Asians for the first time, and there's Buddhism, there's other religions. And I met one man who had just returned from India, and his name was Jesse Sartain, and he told me he had met the Dalai Lama.
Oh.
And that very day I had purchased a book called Tibet from the bookstore in Honolulu, and it was written by the Dalai Lama's brother, Thupten Norbu, from Bloomingdale, Indiana. Yeah. And I was reading about Tibet, And here comes this man who said, I just came back and I met the Dalai Lama in India as a refugee. And my whole body was full of goosebumps. Like just epiphany, we say. I just felt, I have to meet the Dalai Lama. And that is what I want to do. And so I dropped out of university. My parents were absolutely horrified. I went with this man who's 10 years older than me. We're not married. And it's like he took me by the hand and we went to India. And we went overland. So we flew from Hawaii to San Francisco. We took my auntie's car and we drove across country. We flew to Luxembourg, and then we hitchhiked, my thumb, hitchhiked across Europe and all the way across through the Middle East. And we reached into Afghanistan, and there was war with India and Pakistan. This is in 1971. So we can't go by land. So we went back to Iran, to Tehran, and we waited 1 month and waiting. Finally, we decided we'll use the last of our money and buy an air ticket and fly to Delhi. So that's what we did, and we got to India. We went up to Dharamsala, and the Dalai Lama, His Holiness, had just opened the Tibetan Library of Works and Archives, Sarpa Sarkyang, Gozukne. And there was one Geshe Larampa who was teaching, and he had 2 translators who were trained in New Jersey, both Tukus, Sherpa and Kamlung. And it was just an amazing opportunity. He was teaching the Lamrim Chenmo and the Bodhicharya Avatara, the Umajukpa, and leading meditations. And it was all translated into English, and we were in the very first group of that era. And I began to learn and hear the Dharma for the first time. And all the questions, I had like a book of questions. I wrote all my questions. We tried to ask, and the Geshe would say, listen. Tesugusho. Oh yeah. Trela mache. And every question was answered after 6 months. Then I took refuge. Yeah, I took refuge after that. I took the Bodhisattva vows, and I got my name, Sangye Khandro, which was translated as Buddha Fairy. I thought that was kind of funny, a fairy. It means like you fly. But I also got very sick, as many of us did. In that first course, there were many of the great teachers among Westerners were in my course. Alan Wallace, George Dreyfus, Alex Berzin, many of the great original teachers of Buddha Dharma. Jeffrey Hopkins was there. And anyway, we all got very sick, particularly Alan almost lost his life. I did too. I got hepatitis. I almost died. Tibetan medicine saved me. So then we came back to Hawaii. My parents were very unhappy with me. This was difficult because they didn't understand, what is she doing? But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop, right? Unstoppable. And finally my parents, they actually did say, they accepted, because they said, you are becoming a better person. So whatever it is you are learning and doing, it's okay. And unconditional love. So that was the beginning. I did not speak any Tibetan, just receiving in English.
我们刚刚听到了上帝看出了刚刚接触佛法的因缘的故事， 非常感人。我们继续跟上帝看多了一起聊天，为什么呢？一个修行的人，他自己走过的路，经历过的，是最好的修行的榜样。从这个故事当中，我们能够学到很多东西。这是为什么我们今天要继续跟上帝看多了进行访谈的原因。你第一堂的这个学习的行程结束了，而且家人也还是基本上无法理解的，但是你还是仍然那么坚持，这是什么原因？什么力量让你坚持到？
There's no choice. I was burning with interest to learn the Dharma. And I knew that this was the purpose of life. Yes.
那你是怎么再次继续学习的？可不可以进一步跟我们分享？而且为什么开始想学习藏文？
Yes, sure. Yeah, actually my parents were very wonderful parents. And the reason they're upset is because they just wished my happiness. But for them, my happiness was all within the ordinary world, to have material success, right? And so my father had been paying for my university out-of-state tuition, very expensive, and all of that I gave up. I never went back to university. Unlike many other Westerners who studied in India, then they went back to get their degrees so that they could have a job and earn money. I didn't even want to do that. I only wanted to follow the path that my teachers were following. So first of all, I realized I needed to learn Tibetan, because in Dharamsala in those days, everyone was speaking only Tibetan. Every time we went to see our teacher, we had to find a translator. And I knew this is not going to be the way to go forward. So I got a tutor, and I began studying at Nechung Monastery. We were very close with the Nechung monks, and there was one teacher there named Tupshela, and he became my Tibetan grammar teacher and Ume teacher. And then I had another tutor for Kechashea, for colloquial. And just living there, and you begin to learn. I mean, you're actually reduced to becoming like a first grader, because you force yourself to speak Tibetan even though you barely know it, right? But I stopped hanging out with other Westerners and just only with Tibetans and really tried to learn. Then, back in those days, we only could have a 3-month visa in India. The government was always changing, so you had to leave. So you'd go to Nepal. That got old because we would get sick in Nepal. Back then, Nepal was very dirty, easy to get sick, very poor. And then we come back, and so I started going back to Hawaii. And then I would work a little bit, earn some money, and then come back to India. And so I slowly learning that way for some years, and receiving teachings, and beginning to learn the language.
那你觉得有学藏文再学佛法和直接用英文学习佛法有什么差别？
Oh, there's a very, very big difference. This is an important question, because actually the Dharma is still perfectly pure and fully contained in Tibetan, and not yet in English, because there's inconsistencies. It's not the same. When Dharma was translated in Tibet, it was translated by ground-level bodhisattvas, Arya bodhisattvas, who were hand-selected and predicted to do this, to create, this language for the sake of humanity. And, in English, the way the translation process has been occurring is just kind of piecemeal, and everyone's doing their own thing with it. And it's fine, it's good. We have a lot of translations, and it's going very well, but it's still not the same container at all as Tibetan. When you read Dharma in Tibetan, you know that you have something that is 100% authentic, containing the lineage blessings, because it's either the words of the Buddha, or it's coming from Buddha Vajradhara, or it is a Shastra which was composed by an enlightened being. And enlightened beings who compose treatises such as Rongzom Lotsawa and Longchenpa and so forth, what they write is different from what an ordinary person would write. And their writings are all in Tibetan. But the translation has to match the caliber of that original, if possible. And so you see that kind of shows how English or whatever other language becomes compromised in the process. I do believe the English language has the full potential to carry the Dharma just like Tibetan, but we're not there yet. I think it's another 50 to 100 years away. But I don't know.
佛教翻译藏文也有1000多年的历史，在这个过程当中，就像荣松、班智达这样的洛扎瓦，就是翻译家，从印度翻译佛经。那现在像桑金看着了，他们是这个人物从藏文翻译西方世界的英文的这样的一个历史的人物。
Well, it's only because I work with expert Tibetan reader, and we could say readers, but I work with a Kempo, a Lama, who is qualified to read the material and make sure that I understand what it says. That's the reason. It's not just me alone. That's important.
但是我现在问的是，你这个过程当中，除了仁波切和上师们的直接的现场的翻译之外，你自己翻译了，目前为止翻译多少个著作
？Well, that brings up Khenchen Namdrol Rinpoche, because this has been, an extremely blessed and important part of the process. I believe very strongly that translation should take place in the traditional context of first receiving, if it's Sangak Dorji Tekpa, if it's mantra, first receiving empowerment, then reading transmission, then commentary on what you're planning to translate. And then you translate. You don't just pick the commentary and start translating. Like as your dissertation or something. I don't believe that this is going to be of any benefit, ultimately. That's not the purpose of the Dharma. And so with Khenchen Namdrol Rinpoche, through his kindness and his blessings, and also with Lama Chunam, we've been able to to receive the Dharma in that context. So it started really with Khenchen Namdrol asked me to translate the Payul tradition, a book written on the Payul tradition, which was a minor thing, and I did that, but it was the first thing that I worked on with him. And then after that, it was the Zotki Demi, which is the Key to the Precious Treasury commentary to the Guyagarbha Tantra, Zotte. And then Ken Rinpoche, he gave the empowerment. I also received empowerment from Gyabje Pena Rinpoche, an authorization to do this work. So you receive the blessings of the lamas who say, yes, you should do this, and this is how you do it. And so we receive empowerment, we receive reading transmission. That means that you listen, the master reads every word of the text at high speed, And you don't have to know the meaning. You just listen to the sound. And the energy, the dynamic blessing of that power of that sound comes into your mind stream. And it blesses you. And that's the lineage. From the time of Buddha until now, that's how this process has been occurring. Then you have to receive a teaching on what it means. And so Khenchen Namdra Rinpoche taught the commentary, in this case, to one of the, probably the most important Mahayoga Tantras, which is the Guhya Garbha, the magical manifestation matrix. And this really delineates the process of Tantra in 10 topics plus more, describing, so disciples know why we do the practice of Vajrayana. And there are many masters who have written commentaries to that root Tantra. And so when they write a commentary, which is the Shastra, they write it based on the root Tantra. And if they don't write that commentary, it's impossible to understand the root Tantra because it's so condensed. It's cryptic. And so by reading the commentary on each word of the Tantra, all of a sudden you realize, you understand. But even then, it's very difficult. So for example, here we have root Tantra. We have Dodip Tempe Nima, who was one of Dujam Lingpa's 8 sons, great scholar of the Nyingma tradition. He's the one who wrote the commentary. And then you have Khenchen Namdra Rinpoche, contemporary great scholar in this world, teaching Dodip Tempe Nima's commentary. And then me translating orally as he teaches. And then at the same time, Lama Chunam and I produce a provisional translation that we're looking at while he's teaching, and all the students receiving have that translation, understanding that it's provisional. That means it's only temporary. But you need to have that to look at or you can't follow, because these texts are so technical. There's many different layers of the table of contents. You can't believe. So sophisticated. In Tibetan, the Dharma is so sophisticated. It's beyond, really. And so then we receive the full teaching. I translate whatever Khenchen said, and oftentimes this takes weeks and months. Then Lama Chunam and I go back and we polish the translation and we make it final. We correct it and we publish the book. So we've done that with Khenchen Namdra Rinpoche, that exact process, for 3 commentaries to the Guhya Garbha Tantra, 3 of them. The most exhaustive is the Longchenpa, Omniscient Longchenpa's Chokchu Munsel, Dispelling Darkness Throughout the 10 Directions. A very, very long commentary on that same Tantra. And that time we received instructions also from Trinley Norpa Rinpoche, right here in Palm Desert. Very often as we were working on it, we were able to ask Rinpoche questions, and Rinpoche would give very lengthy, amazing explanations. And Rinpoche told us that Rinpoche received teaching on Chokchu Munzal 10 times in his life. And he still doesn't understand, he said. So you see, it's not as though, it's not just intellectual. The understanding comes through practice. And the combination come together. So we published that book. And then another commentary is composed by Ju Mipam Rinpoche, which is called Osel Ningpo, Essence of Clear Light. And we translated this in the same exact way. And during these years, Khenchen Namdra Rinpoche was considered to be the foremost expert on Guhya Garbha, really in the world, because he went to Tibet and he received the teachings from Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, and then he received authorization and mandate to come and give these teachings in the Western world. And Rinpoche decided to give them in America, which is quite shocking. With me as his translator, Rinpoche somehow believed that this would be the most secure way, I think, to have the publications and all the teachings available in the English language, and then they could be translated, and they are translated. Many of them are being translated into Chinese, into Spanish, and other languages. Actually, when Ken Rinpoche teaches in Europe, simultaneous translation into 3 languages occurs off of my English. And so it's really spreading, in a greater way. Then Ken Rinpoche decided to teach Dzogchen.
Wow.
And now he's focusing only on Dzogchen, like primarily. Yeshe Lama, Jigme Lingpa's instruction manual. And let's see, also Buddhahood Within Reach, Khenpo Jigme Punsok's Dzogchen teachings, Sangye Lakchang. He taught this in extensive detail. And then he taught 2 years in France on Khenpo Ngakchung's oral lineage, whispered lineage, Trekchit. I was the translator on all these occasions. And then he started to teach Jetsun Nyingtik. He taught Jamgon Khanpo Rinpoche's commentary in its entirety. And then he taught Lerab Lingpa's commentary in its entirety. And these are all books that we've published, all these teachings, yeah. And then Rinpoche decided to start teaching Longchenpa and Sikdun Rinpoche's The Precious Treasury of the Genuine Meaning. Ken Rinpoche taught for 5 years. And he came to America each year and taught for 2 weeks. So in a sense, it's just 2 weeks, but over a period of 5 years. And in those 2 weeks, he would teach from early morning, like all morning and all afternoon, many hours, no breaks, like a lot of teaching. And so that is Omniscient Longchenpa's quintessential teaching on Togel. In Dzogchen, there's 2 main paths, Trekchit and Togel. And so prior to that, mentioning Yeshe Lama, Jetsun Nyingtik, Khenpo Ngaga, this was focusing more on the Trekchit. But now he's teaching Togel. And so he taught that, and we also produced that publication. And then Rinpoche had been asked for many years to teach Longchenpa's quintessential writing, the most important thing he ever wrote, which is called the Jewel Treasure of the Dharma Dhatu. Chuying Rinpoche Zut. This Ken Rinpoche came to America every year, and then actually COVID hit. So we started in person, then COVID hit, and Rinpoche didn't know what to do. At first, Rinpoche couldn't relate to Zoom, and he said, I'm not going to just teach to nobody. I can't look out and there's nobody there and teach, He's never had that experience, right? But actually, once we got started, he liked it very much. Oh, this is great, I don't have to travel. So for like 2 years, we had teaching sessions, and it took 6 years to complete, Chuying Rinpoche Zut. And we published that book this last spring. That's our latest, most important publication of our lifetime. Yes.
所以，刚刚曾经看到了分享的这些翻译呢，是整个藏传佛教，尤其是宁玛传承的心脏一样的一个教法。宁玛密续当中的关于大幻化王的部分，再加上大圆满的龙千巴大师的七宝藏等等的内容，这个整个的巨著其实能够完整的翻译成英文，那是非常不容易的。再加上有观点、口传、传承， 有书生的上师的亲自从头到尾的一个指导和教导的情况下翻译，没有任何的这种商业的和随便的那种态度，极为严谨的态度能够翻译，那个是我觉得也是整个的我们的这个传承和教法的一个追随者的一个福报。以前九一宁玛的这个传承的时候，一个罗扎瓦有另一个指导上师一起，对，恳请南州仁波切，他以作为一个最至高的指导上师，扎格吉堪布一样的，那上面看到了在敬座前，就是作为一个罗扎瓦的身份，能够翻译是非常殊胜的。我下一个问题要请教你，你在这个翻译的过程当中遇到最大的一个困难是什么？而且你做翻译的时候需要具备的根本的这个佛法的那种殊胜的教法翻译的时候需要具备的条件是哪一些？
The main condition is you have to have understanding of the subject. Many people, even Tibetan lamas, come and they plan to teach a text, and then they say, I need a translator, but they don't consider the qualifications of the translator. And if the translator doesn't know very much about the subject that they're going to teach, what do you expect? You know what I'm saying? So it's very important, but it's overlooked all the time because the position of a translator is not regarded and respected in the way that it should be. It's a very important position. It's crucial. I mean, that Lama has to understand every word that he or she is saying is falling into the responsibility of the translator, representing their speech, right? So for me, I was, from early on, I was translating not because that's what I wanted to do. It's because there was no one else to do it. And so I was in many very uncomfortable situations in the very beginning. But that was how it was back then. And I learned a lot. And did I do a very good job? Maybe not. But I did the best I could, and there was no one else to do it, right? So then, as things evolved, I decided I would only translate for lamas that I had a connection with, like faith and devotion, spiritual connection, and the subject that the Lama will tell me what he's going to teach and I can prepare. I'm not going to go there unprepared, although I still had to do that many times. But it's not ideal. So that later I became more and more selective and strict about how and to who I translate for. And now my main challenges have been, I feel like the translator, first of all, needs to deliver the meaning. That's number one. Secondly, they need to deliver it in the order that the teacher says it. Jikrim, Yoruba. And then third is the style of the teacher. You are not the teacher, you're the translator. Many translators take that and then they turn their own personality and they say, they'll translate. I try very hard not to do that. I want to, when I'm translating for Kenshin Namdro Rinpoche, I want to be Kenshin Namdro Rinpoche for the students. That's my goal. So in order to accomplish these three things, I have to take notes. If you don't take notes, unless you're brilliant, you won't get the jikrim, the order. Yeah. You'll make your own order, and then everything starts to change. And that is not the same personality or delivery that master intended. So that's Really, my challenge is there. And oftentimes, you know, the teachers I've translated for, they go on for very, very long periods of time. Trilly Nobu Rinpoche sometimes would go on for 40 minutes. But Rinpoche trusted me. And I knew the subject. And I take shorthand my own way of doing it so that I felt confident I can do this. And it's similar with Kenshin Namdo Rinpoche. So there's a sense of comfort and confidence. And if that's not there, it's really not a good idea to even try. It's better to say, I don't know.
后来的你的学佛的过程当中，你和你的父母、家人之间的一些相处啊，这个方面你们是怎么处理的？因为这个很多北京不是佛教文化没有佛教文化背景的人来讲的话，经常要面临的一个问题，其实这个也是很重要的。
Yes, from the 1970s when my parents felt like Buddhism was a cult and they were afraid that I was going into a negative direction, slowly, as I mentioned, they noticed me becoming a better person. Not that I was a bad person, but I was more considerate of my parents, because we learn in Dharma that every living being has been your kind mother, your father. You learn the kindness of your parents, and you are required to repay their kindness while you're alive with this life's parents. They gave you your life. In Mormonism, I never learned these things, and I never really, treated my parents that special. But I came back from learning Dharma, and all of a sudden, I'm treating my parents very special. And of course, they noticed that, And then over time, they became proud of me because the Dalai Lama was coming more to the United States, and everyone had very good impression of him. Such an amazing teacher on all levels. And also one time in Hawaii, we were sponsoring the 16th Karmapa's visit. And I had an interview with my mother, with him, just the three of us. And after the interview, he said, "Hoi," he got his attendant, go bring a book. The attendant came back with a Bible. And he gave my mother a Bible, the Karmapa. And that, she thought that was really beautiful. So it was all good. There were difficult parts because I was the spiritual companion of Gyalta Rinpoche for many years. And Rinpoche was much older than me. And Rinpoche always wore his robes. He never wore pants, never seen him wear pants. And the Rinpoche met my parents many times, and they really liked him, but they didn't understand why I was accompanying him all the time like that. They just never understood. They wanted me to have someone else, And that was just a little bit of a conflict, but it was fine. It worked out really well. Right now, only my brother is alive. My parents are gone. But my brother is very proud and happy, and yes, no problem at all. Is he a Buddhist? No.
我现在接下来想问的是关于你和你的佛法的老师们之间的一些故事。首先，我想好奇你跟陈林诺布仁波切是什么样的情况下认识的？
I first met Rinpoche in Hawaii back in 1975. And I had met his father before that and had taken refuge with Gyabche Dujum Rinpoche. We invited Gyabche Dujum Rinpoche and his family to Hawaii. They were in Hong Kong, and they were coming to Berkeley. They were invited by Dartong Tuku Rinpoche, and they wanted to stop in Hawaii. And so at that time, traveling with them was Sonam Kazi. He's a Sikamese aristocrat and translator. He's passed away, but Yawa Topke was his name. He was a great scholar. And he called and asked if Jesse and I, my husband at the time, if we could invite the Dujum family. So we did. And that's when Gyabje Dujum Rinpoche became my root guru. But then, like 2 years later, Trillian Rinpoche was in Hawaii because he was recovering from surgery. And that's when I met Rinpoche. And over the years, I regretted not being able to completely be with and study with Rinpoche continuously. But there were circumstances that didn't allow for that. But later, I was able to connect very strongly once again with Rinpoche in the 1990s. And Rinpoche asked me to come and translate for Rinpoche for an important teaching that he was giving on Nangjang, Dujum Lingpa's Nangjang, at Pemo Saling for 1 month. And it was unusual because Rinpoche did not like to work with translators. Rinpoche spoke good English. And he was very particular about his English, like very particular. And so it didn't work out with translators because they would start translating and Rinpoche didn't like it. And he would say, okay, goodbye, you know, you're out. So when Rinpoche invited me to translate for him, I came down from Oregon and there were some other translators there, my good friend Stephen Goodman, professor, and he said, oh, Sangye, you will probably last 1 night, you know, just be prepared. Rinpoche is very, very difficult. He won't like it. But it's interesting that he asked you. And he asked me because of his health. And Lama Tarchin Rinpoche also asked, because Rinpoche's heart was bothering him. Rinpoche had angina. And so it's easier for Rinpoche to speak in Tibetan. And this is something, it's kind of a side topic, but a lot of people don't realize this. When a great master like Rinpoche, or even the Dalai Lama, when they speak Dharma in Tibetan versus English, it's the difference of heaven and earth. It's completely different, right? Of course Rinpoche knows. Trillian Rinpoche has every citation from the important tantras by memory. He's teaching Dharma and just bringing in these citations, and it's like a flowing river. You are transported to the pure realms when he teaches. When he teaches English, it's not like that at all. It's very wonderful, but it's completely different, limited. So anyway, the first night I sat there and I translated, and it went really well. And Rinpoche was happy, and thank you, Sangye Khandrila. I didn't have to speak English, much easier for me, Rinpoche was saying, you know. And so I felt very happy. Then the next night it started. Rinpoche would say, and I started, and then Rinpoche would interrupt. Tetsuguna, don't you think maybe you should use this word for this? Why? Because this word means this, and Rinpoche starts giving explanation on words, etymology, in English. Yeah. And I never even thought of that before, you know? Like, for example, we say Kor De. It's very common in liturgy, samsara and enlightenment, samsara and nirvana. Korwa means samsara, De means beyond or transcendence. So it's translated as Ngangen La De, or to transcend sorrow. And so nirvana. But Rinpoche said, when I'm teaching Dzogchen, you don't say nirvana because that's not our goal. Our goal is Sangye Gisa. So you say enlightenment. And Rinpoche was teaching like that. Because in Hinayana and also in Mahayana, they will use nirvana. But anyway, little things. So Rinpoche started training me, and the teaching turned into a training process. And then Rinpoche thought, I don't want to interrupt my teaching. So the next night, his Shapji came to me. She's unraveling a string. And she said, Sangye Kando, can I tie this to your toe? I said, what? She said, yeah, your big toe. We just tie here. And then Rinpoche has the end of the string. And if Rinpoche decides he doesn't like the word you're using, he will pull it. And then, your foot will go up. And then you stop talking. Katsum. You stop. And then Rinpoche will be able to say. So that started. And that went on for about 5 days. And then Rinpoche no longer put the string on me. And for the rest of the teaching, it flowed really, really well. It was incredible. I could offer to Rinpoche. He was very happy. And it was one of the best, most amazing times of my life.
您和陈林诺布仁波切一起的这个时间有多少年？多长？
Well, I met him in the 70s, so it's 40 years. And Rinpoche was 40. 40, huh?
No. 你们念的
Oh, just together. Nyamdarang. Never just like continuously, no. Coming, going, coming, going. Rinpoche used to scold me because we would be here together and then I'm always leaving because I'm always going to translate. Like for Pena Rinpoche, Yangtang Rinpoche, important things, but Rinpoche said, yes, that's important, but one day you're going to die. So where is your session? Where's your meditation session? So I stopped translating even for Pena Rinpoche, I discontinued, and even Yangtang Rinpoche, I thought Rinpoche told me I should practice more. Because if I don't practice, I'm going to grow old, and when you grow old, if you have big name as a translator, it means nothing. The only thing that matters is what you did with your accomplishment in your life when you die. And Rinpoche warned me, and it was the most kind advice I've ever had. Now, do I follow it perfectly? No. I'm still very distracted. I'm very lazy. I don't practice enough, all those things, but I was trying my best. Rinpoche was the greatest master.
很多的这些上师，尤其是这些宁玛的这些，他们就越成就，他们越有点与世隔绝的生活，越喜欢真正的实修，所以就他教出来的学生也不一样。我听说东西陈林诺布仁波切是很不一样的风格的一个上师，有时候比较直接，或者有点脾气也不是很好，听说。而且很多的上师以前的确实也有这种教法的方式。因为我也最近翻译了一个禅宗 Zen Buddhism 的一个著作。这个里面他有一个大师说到，我是不顾人情世故。他说，真正的修行人是不顾人情世故。从这个方面呢，你有没有什么可以分享？
That's all true. Rinpoche was very unconventional. I've spent my whole life with great masters, actually, not just as their translator, but accompanying them on tours, living with them, cooking for them, serving them. With Rinpoche, he was the most unconventional of all, not like any other. Unique. And the uniqueness was that, especially as Rinpoche got older, when Rinpoche was a bit younger, and I knew him then too, Rinpoche was more willing to, teach to crowds that would just spontaneously gather. But everything always had to be spontaneous. Rinpoche was the master of his own world. He controlled his environment, very much so. You did not control it for him, and he didn't like that. So if you ever tried to do that, like right down to who you're going to invite to his teaching, that wasn't something that you do. He was in charge, 100%. So we learned the hard way on that a few times, because you get very eager as a disciple. Oh, this guru, my guru is so incredible. I want my friends to come. And then you bring them and it's not good. Very wrathful. And Rinpoche showed wrathful style, which is the expression of great compassion. He showed that to me, I mentioned earlier, because he thought I was too busy. World traveler, important person. And one time in a phone call, Rinpoche called out of nowhere and just was so harsh with me. I was just crying, just sobbing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I thought I was finished and cut off and going straight to hell, is what I thought. Just, it's over. You might as well shoot me. I was just, couldn't believe it. And then right at the end, Rinpoche even called me a she-devil. You're a she-devil, Dremo. But he translated he translated it as she-devil, which was kind of funny. And then right at the end he goes, but it doesn't matter. I love you. Click. And he hung up. And so everything was okay at the end, In other words, I'm not cutting you off. I love you, but look at your faults. Take a look. So kyun, so rongkyun da. And the guru's job is to teach the disciple how to see their faults, how to turn the finger, not out, but here. We're always blaming everyone else, We're very happy to put the blame outside of ourselves. Rinpoche never allowed that. Any kind of tricks or games, if you were going to be his disciple, you have to give that up. So we were all kind of, you might as well have been naked. You were just ripped off the clothing of all of your disguises, and you just had to be genuine and faithful and quiet. Another thing was Rinpoche did not like a lot of chatter. Like in Dharma gatherings and communities, everyone's talking, very busy energy, You couldn't do that around Rinpoche. You have to be quiet, and you can't ask Rinpoche, you can't start the conversation. Rinpoche starts the conversation. So if you are Rinpoche and I came to see you, I really can't say anything until Rinpoche speaks. So there's rules. Trim.
我的以前的一些同学，也20-30年专门从香港那个台湾去美国，就拜见东西陈林伯母亲，他们也跟我分享过，当时他们做徽工操，或者带领学生的那种场景，非常优雅，非常宁静，非常有质感的这种一个状态，又是很多的这种年轻人呐，大家一起参加，又是非常开放，又是非常进来就非常舒服，这样，那种不是有一个特别的带人的方法。接下来我再想问一个问题：除了陈林诺布仁波切之外，您一直最多的应该是看金刚仁波切，是不是？就是翻译的。
So Rinpoche is asking how I first met Khenchen Namdro Rinpoche, and to speak about that. So That was in Namdroling Monastery back in the 1980s. Gyaltsen Rinpoche and I were invited by Gyabje Rinpoche, and we stayed there for about a month. And at that time, I met Khenchen Namdrol Rinpoche. He was just Khenpo Namdrol then. And he came to our room with this book of the Peyul Denrab. Peyul Denrab. The history of the Peyul tradition. In Nyingma, we have 6 traditions, and one of them is Peyul. And that was the tradition of Pena Rinpoche and his entire monastery. And so he wanted this to be translated, Khenchen Namdrol. And I wasn't really actively translating literature at that time. So he worked with me and another chap named Mudrup. Paljor. Yeah, Paljor. And we translated that. And then Khenchen Namdrol brought Khenpo Jigme Punsok Rinpoche to America in 1993. And that was a very big deal. You can imagine. And so he was in charge of that tour. Khenpo Sotarge was the attendant, but Khenpo Namdrol and Ngudrupla, his attendant, Lama Ngudrup, Drukpa, they were in charge of the whole tour and making sure everything went well. And so Khenpo Namdrol called Gyaltsen Rinpoche, and then Gyaltsen Rinpoche and myself, we were the main ones in America. And then Chokdrit Rinpoche also got involved and invited to his center for part of it. But mostly the whole tour was arranged by Gyaltsen Rinpoche with Khenpo Namdrol and me. And so during that tour, we were together for 3 months, living together, traveling. Yes. I was translator. That was very hard job.
Big story.
Yeah. But Khenpo Namdrol helped me to translate for his guru. So then Khenpo Namdrol was asked to teach sometimes because Khenpo Jigpun was elderly and, he wanted rest. And so when Khenpo Namdrol taught, I would translate. And I noticed this is the most organized, exceptional delivery of Dharma that I've ever heard. I mean, to put it bluntly, he's the best teacher I'd ever heard, just as a teaching, the capacity to teach. I don't mean so much the Nangden being profound, but the way that he would organize his teachings and deliver it was so clear. I just was shocked. And it was so enjoyable. He taught Purba. I remember the first time was in Colorado. Everything he taught, it was just so good. And all the students felt the same way. They were like, wow, what a good teacher. Amazing. We never heard this kind of teaching, And so that's how it started. But I was never, I never became like a close attendant or follower of Khenchen. I always stayed my distance, and whenever he needed me or wanted me, I was there. I am there. But I don't, hang around with him otherwise, if you know what I mean. It's not something, I never felt inclined to do that, although these days, now getting older, sometimes because we don't see him for so long, I really miss him. And so maybe we like to go to Nepal sometimes just to be close, but he has been incredibly kind. There's no words.
刚刚上帝看着了分享的看经经灭判咒，就是我们中文里面经常听到的法王如意宝。法王如意宝来美国的时候，上帝看着了是法王身边的英文的翻译，在法王一起待了3个月的时间。这个我们现在一般的华人弟子很难以想象的一个福报。当然，主要也是因为他有这个能力。所以我接下来又要问另外一个问题了： 您能不能您跟看真经纬彭祖仁波切一起的这个一些法王的一些教导啊，这些会议，能不能一些跟我们分享一下？
Khenchen Jigme Phuntsog Rinpoche was accompanied by his sister, Ani Maedren, and her daughter, Ani Mumso, so his niece. So there was 3 of them. And when we first met, it was in Hawaii. Gyaltsen Rinpoche stayed back to greet them in San Francisco, but they first landed in Hawaii. And so I went to Hawaii. I founded a temple in Hawaii years ago on the Big Island called Nechung Dryang Ling, and it was there that they went. And I'll never forget, because they arrived in the middle of the night, and then the next morning walk in the room to greet them. Here they were. They're all very big, you know, Kuzu Chempo. Yeah. And their faces are so round and so red. It was completely, they were hot. It's Hawaii, you know. They were so red and the sweat was pouring and they had all their wool clothes on, you know. It was really, couldn't believe it to see them. It didn't look like they'd been dropped in it looked just like they were dropped in a foreign location. And then it started, and he was very Popa Chempo. I never met a teacher like that. For me, it was the first time to hear and translate for a master who almost sounded like he was boasting. You know, he was boasting. And that's the opposite of, like, you know, the other teachers I'd been working with. So I thought, did he really say that? You know, oh my God, am I going to say the wrong thing? You know, Tokpaza, because shocking. But he was always saying very shocking things. You know? Really, like, we're the best in this and that. He was really, really so confident. It's a courage and a confidence, not really ego boasting. But that I noticed about him. I never met any master like that. And then he was very connected to his niece. It was like if she got sick or she was not happy, he was sick and he was not happy. It just was very close connection. And mostly they did not adjust well to being in the West. They couldn't get used to this culture. Not the diet, not the people, not the place, you know, but of course he's a great master, so he was seeing it as a pure land, but on a physical, ordinary level, it was hard for them. And so Ken Rinpoche Namdrol was totally stressed out the whole time. And so it was stressful for all of us. You know, it was really trying to make them comfortable. They didn't like the food. The last thing, it turned out mostly they ate English muffins the whole time with butter on it because they didn't like to eat almost anything else. Rejection. They didn't eat any of the meat. It was hard. But he delivered amazing Dharma. When you look back now at the videos of his teachings, and we have all of that, he delivered the entire Jetsun Nyingtik. He delivered many Dzogchen teachings and Gesar, and just very beautiful. One story I have, there's many, but this was in Canada, in Nova Scotia. It was his public talk. We had just arrived there. And there were already like 5,000 people in the amphitheater, downtown Nova Scotia. And he became sick. And he was sick because Ani Mumso was sick. She was sick the whole time. And we were driving, Khenpo Namdrol said, we have to cancel this event. And Khenpo Jigpun said, no, I'm going. And it was like back and forth, and it was really, what do we do? He's so sick. Finally, he just got up and he walked out to the car and he got in and we all went. we get there and we go to the backstage, the back way in, like movie star, you know. And immediately he went to the restroom, and you could hear him vomiting very loud. Ugh. He was so sick. You could hear it. When we were all standing outside of there just going, oh my, what are we going to do? Poor Khenpo Namdrol, he was beside himself. And then all of a sudden, the great Khenpo comes out, and he contained himself, and he said, let's go. And he and I walked out on the stage, and he got in his seat, and I sat there, and he was perfectly fine. And he taught for an hour and a half, amazing teaching. And then it was over, and then said goodbye to everyone, got back up, went straight to the bathroom, and again sick, like totally sick, vomiting. It was like you saw him almost perform the miracle of making himself well and then going back to where he left off. Mm-hmm. He was like that. It was really a roller coaster ride, but an amazing experience of a lifetime. But they were from such a different culture. They really did not fit in this culture. And so he also said, this is my one and only trip. I will not come back here. This is it, one time. And he never came back.
那你现在后来能理解法王如意报的那种跟其他的上师完全不一样的那种，他可能不是说什么笑，大家让他很惊讶的那种说出的一切，他现在能理解吗？
Yes, I saw it again in Kusum Lingpa. Yeah, Kusum Lingpa, he came. But Khenpo Jigpun was unique. It was like he was a Shambhala warrior.
I think it's Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche also similar.
That kind of popa? I don't know. I wasn't around him that much, but no, he was kind of subdued. Khenpo Jigpun, when you think about who he was and then in this culture, he didn't hold back anything. He was just whatever, natural and spontaneous. So you were just running around trying to figure out what he's going to do next, like that.